And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Breslin Center, Michigan State with a huge victory over number 10 ranked Illinois, 88-80. A Saturday afternoon game. First of all, Saturday afternoons just like old-time Big Ten basketball, and it was a slugfest. And Illinois brings it on the boards, and Michigan State met them with great physicality on the boards to begin with. Defense, Michigan State productive offensively. AJ Hoggard with a comeback moment today. He was fired up. Izzo was fired up. It was looking bleak there with about 10 minutes to go. Michigan State got it turned around, and it turns their season back in the right direction also for now. Konyndyk, your thoughts? Paul Konyndyk, ladies and gentlemen.
First off, I think the reaction to the Minnesota game was overblown. I mean, Minnesota was playing really good. You know, we can't talk about a team playing well coming into the game, and then you look at what happened in Minnesota. Michigan State, yeah, they missed all those free throws. That's the problem in my mind. But Minnesota's playing as good a basketball as they can play.
They're an NCAA tournament team playing at home.
Right, and you know, what happens? They're up comfortably. They're starting to do some things against pretty good defense, and Tyson Walker gets hurt. And then they lose their momentum, and they don't get it back. And Minnesota feels good about itself. You know, Cam Christie goes crazy there, which I expected him to do, which I wrote about earlier in the week. But he couldn't do it here. And Michigan State at home, it's a different story. You know, in a close game, you feed off your crowd. Every time you make a defensive stop and that crowd cheers and it just gets in your veins, it makes you want to go that much harder and do it again. And I think Hoggard in this game, there's a couple moments where he got addicted to the adrenaline he got from the crowd, from playing strong defense. And, you know, Illinois had some shots go down and rim out. They missed some really good shots down the stretch at times. You know, some guys miss the front end and one-on-ones that I wouldn't expect to miss the front end and one-on-ones. That's what happens on the road. You know, Illinois went like 1 for 12 down the stretch in that game. That's something we've seen happen in Michigan State a few times. But this was a great bounce back for Michigan State. But I don't think that game at Minnesota was anywhere emblematic for what kind of team this is. I think that was a typical. Yeah, super disappointing. I understand why Tom Izzo was upset. I understand why the team was upset. But that was like one of those, you know, disappointed fans. I'm going to throw my team under the bus. I'm going to just give up. And now, guess what? I'm back. They beat the top 10 team. This is what we see every year from Michigan State, whether it's a loss at Nebraska, a loss at Penn State by 2 points or something like that. You see fans, oh, my God, Michigan State's not going to make the NCAA tournament this year. I'm going to give up on them. Then they go and beat Illinois. And all of a sudden you're back on the bandwagon. I'm not saying you shouldn't be disappointed, but Michigan State played great today. They beat a team that I don't think they should have beat, a team they don't match up well with. So from that standpoint, this is a huge victory for Michigan State because they found a way to win, grit out a win against a team that really should have their number, had their number coming into this game. 4 wins in a row, and Michigan State doesn't have many favorable matchups. The only thing they have really is the ability to get downhill at the point guard position, which Hoggard did, and they've got some mid-range options.
But then Hoggard's getting guarded by a big guy, and Walker's getting guarded by a big guy, and they're quick big guys. Right. So you're right. I mean, there are no matchup advantages for Michigan State in this game. Meanwhile, Tyson Walker's playing at, 70%? We don't know. In the post-game locker room, Walker was sheepish about it and saying, no, I'm not hurt, I'm fine. But we know he's not. He was struggling and limping around. He says, I always walk. He says, I always limp. I'm from New York. We limp. You know, that's what he said in the locker room. But he was hurting, and you saw it. You know, Michigan State had that little 8-0 run that went from being down 72-64 to tied 72-72. And Malik Hall had a big follow-up putback during that sequence off a Tyson Walker miss. And Walker drove trying to beat Tyson Walker, but just doesn't quite have all the octane. And if you looked closely, you saw Tyson Walker. I don't know if they mentioned this on the telecast or not. I don't know. I have access to the feed. But Walker went up and grimaced in pain as he shot that. And Malik Hall, to his credit, ran the floor, hustled, got the putback. But it was not. Michigan State had to come back a couple of times in this game, and they had to do it with a diminished Tyson Walker. And they got it from Hall. They got some defense from Hoggard, some good quarterbacking from Hoggard, some timely shooting from Akins here and there, and ended up Michigan State was a team, it's a cliche, but they wanted it more. They had to win it. Hoggard said, play desperate was one of their battle cries. They were, and coming into the game, that was the advantage Michigan State had. They had to have this more than Illinois did. They wanted it more than Illinois on this particular day, doing it at home. All those intangibles put Michigan State over the top against an Illinois team that's better than Michigan State right now, but Michigan State's still coming along.
Yeah, and the Tyson Walker, we saw early in the game when he had eight quick points. We saw what Tyson Walker can do when he feels pretty good. He had that one cut where he was going right, kind of stopped and popped a three, and the entire defense went the way he was going, and that was as good as we've seen him move. And then as the game went on, as he had to guard Terrence Shannon, which is no easy task, and move laterally like that, that's when I think, and he had to play like maybe more minutes because Trey Holloman was unavailable. So those are the kind of things I think Michigan State wanted to try to substitute him a little bit more. Foul trouble hurt that. I think Tom Izzo was worried about, on the ride in, I was listening to the pregame, and Tom Izzo, that's one of the things that he was, he hates drive to foul teams. And that's what Illinois is. I mean, they hit a lot of threes, but they're primarily a drive to get fouled team.
And they picked up a foul on Hall the first possession of the game. Right. And they didn't really go back after that. That might have been a missed opportunity. You don't really want to go hunting fouls early in the game.
Yeah, I thought
but Michigan State, I'm like, man, if Hall gets in foul trouble, they got a problem. But Hall managed to not get in foul trouble despite that one foul in the first 30 seconds off a drive.
I thought they did go after it, but then I thought.
And he did a good. Hall did it. You're right. I'm wrong. You're right. And then Hall did a real good job. Right. Being in position, but not doing too much. So real smart on defense by Hall today.
Yeah, the other thing is, too, I think Coleman Hawkins played into his hands. Coleman Hawkins is a spaz. He's a hell of a player. He's a Michigan State Spartan killer. We've seen that over the years. But he has the ability to unravel his team when he goes Coleman Hawkins. And today I felt like he went Coleman Hawkins a few times. He took some really bad shots that sometimes he makes from the perimeter. And then I thought they tried to go back to him inside late, and by that point, the momentum had switched to Michigan State. I thought Hall had a couple really good defensive possessions late. I thought Carson Cooper did a nice job staying walled up on some of that stuff inside. But
and Hall was guarding Hawkins late, but he didn't guard him for the first 30 minutes for the most part.
Exactly.
Late in the game, when he only had 2 fouls on himself, they could put Hall on Hawkins. And don't underestimate Malik Hall's defense today. Not exactly, lockdown Swiss Army knife, defensive stopper, but you have to have that 6'8" guy that can guard anyone from 6'10" to 6'7",
right.
And he's not going to go out and guard Terrence Shannon, but he gave them, some of that. I don't want to say Andre Hudson defense. I don't want to say Brandon Dawson defense, but he covered the mismatch type of guy to an extent. And Hawkins is a mismatch guy with the way he can step out and put Hall on him, and Hall was real good against him defensively late.
It's different, too, because he might not be as good. I think Jaden Akins played a great defensive game today. Hall's not as good, in my opinion, a defender as Jaden Akins, but against the Coleman Hawkins, he's got some advantages that Jaden Akins doesn't have. Jaden Akins has to be right up in his kitchen. He has to be right up there to make sure he can contest that quick release
and Akins was the primary defender on Hawkins a lot in the first half. And they did that the first time they played Illinois a few weeks ago also, because Hawkins basically plays as like a guard out there. He's 6'10", but he plays a guard position. Last time Michigan State had Akins on him, and they had Sissoko on Rogers. Right. Which teams were starting to put centers on Rogers, even though Rogers is kind of a lead guard for them. They don't really have a pure point guard. They're kind of positionless. And other teams had put centers on Rogers. Sissoko they put on Rogers last time, and Rogers capitalized by hitting little medium rangers and driving on him and scored 15 points and did a lot of damage. Today they had similar matchups at times, but didn't leave Rogers unguarded. I don't think Sissoko did it correctly the way they mapped it out, but he had never been asked to guard a guard and not guard him before, so it was new for him.
Nor honestly should he have been asked to do that. I mean, we can talk about a guy not executing an assignment, and we always talk about know your personnel. I mean, Ty Rogers, he might not be able to shoot the ball, but there's guys that can't shoot the ball that can still slash. He's an athlete. He's got some ball skills. And if your center's never done that, and the guy's in attack mode, Michigan State knows Michigan State, from having recruited him, from having evaluated him, they know Ty Rogers well enough to know that shouldn't have worked. So that's one of those things where, looking back, you can blame it on the player, but sometimes the player's not capable of executing the assignment. I'll go back to the Jaden Akins on Coleman Hawkins. To ask Jaden Akins to do that straight up on Coleman Hawkins for 30, 35 minutes, that's diminishing returns right there because of how long Coleman Hawkins is. But if you can buy some time for Malik Hall, and then all of a sudden Hall's got that ability to have some length, and so he doesn't have to be necessarily right up on Coleman Hawkins as closely as Jaden Akins would have to be, just because he's a little bit longer. But I thought this was one of the more complete games that Malik Hall played. There's still a couple times where it's like, why turn down an open three? But we saw him make a couple shots. We saw kudos to him for bouncing back, just the mental side of it, going 1 for 6 at the free throw line at Minnesota, and then going 7 for 9. And you might be like, well, that's what he should do. He's a 73 or 75% free throw shooter. But if you see him warming up, see him practicing, he might shoot 75%, but he doesn't have the confidence of a typical 75% free throw shooter. So to see him make those 3-point plays late, a big game for him, and just a big game for Michigan State overall. I felt like one of the things I saw from Michigan State down the stretch when AJ Hoggard had the big three. They have the 6-point lead into 3, and then he had the 3-point play. I think Illinois thought after they went up by 8 that Michigan State was done, because it was similar to the first game. And they know that they match up with Michigan State well. They know that Michigan State doesn't have as many big bodies and as many athletes as they do. I think there was a sense of panic with Illinois, and I think they got sped up a little bit. But after A.J. Hoggard hits the 3, then he hits the 3-point play, and then you see those quirky turnovers out there in the backcourt. I think Illinois kind of got sped up.
Turnovers were strange, weren't they?
No,
they were trying to initiate their offense on the left wing.
Those are crap to bed turnovers. Those are uncharacteristic turnovers. I don't care if you don't have a true point guard. Those are turnovers that happen when you've got a team that's trying to lock down on defense, and you got a team that is panicking. There's something in their mind going on besides I have to play this play. They're not looking at the moment, not looking at the particular play. You're looking at what's happening. They're up 8, and all of a sudden they weren't, and then it was panic mode.
It seemed like I don't know if it's panic, if they just kind of went on vacation.
There's lack of poise.
Yeah,
but that's what happens. That's what happens when guys aren't hitting threes. That's the other thing at that point. They weren't getting some of the threes that they've gotten earlier. So as a guard, you're like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I driving? Am I kicking? I mean, they got sped up, and I think they didn't know what to do.
And the lack of a quarterback kind of showed itself there a little bit. Coleman Hawkins gets a little bit, persnickety there a little bit.
He's dumb.
No, come on.
He's a dumb basketball player, and he's had to fight that throughout his career. Spaz. I'm not going to say dumb, but he's like maybe overly enthusiastic at times.
A little overzealous.
He has more confidence than he deserves to have. Just one of those guys. I mean, we've all been around guys
great skill,
like
great
that.
size.
And he's awesome.
And he's got a chance to make a lot of money with those skills.
And he's an awesome player when he's dialed in, but he's the kind of guy that if he fogs out and you don't reel that in, it can go south real quickly, and it's been a problem for him throughout his career. So I apologize for Coleman Hawkins for saying he's dumb.
You'll retract that statement. That's
I will,
not the
because
right
I
word.
don't mean I've never talked to him. I don't know. I'm not talking about lack of intelligence.
I'm talking about basketball decisions.
I'm talking about basketball IQ, what this situation dictates as opposed to what he's doing. Because there's times where you've got Terrence Shannon who's driving to the basket at will, getting to the free throw line. So you don't need Coleman. If you're Coleman Hawkins, you don't need him to pull the trigger on a 3-pointer 6 feet behind the line when his teammates aren't in position to get an offensive rebound.
He's got some skill, man, and he's a difficult matchup at the 5, being able to shoot like he can, and that's just the start of a cascade of matchup problems that Illinois presents in a Michigan State team that does not have a lot of defensive. They've got some defensive weaknesses. They don't have a 6'7" guy that can guard a wing like Terrence Shannon or AJ Storr. So they put Akins on Shannon a little bit today after Shannon got 6 straight points at one stage against Walker. And Illinois does a really good job hunting matchup advantages.
Right.
They've got matchup advantage on Michigan State and a lot of other teams too. And Walker's trying. He's got the groin situation, and he's 4 inches shorter, and he's trying to move and get out on him. And Terrence Shannon just making moves, hitting medium range jumpers. And one time, transition looked about as fast as I've seen.
That was amazing.
They had a blitz counter break. They don't run the blitz counter break a lot, but they do it well when they do. And Shannon got loose for a layup against Walker. Did you have the same thought on that? Once in a while, I see someone who's like that. Not very often. That's what Derrick Rose looked like when Michigan State lost to Memphis in the Sweet 16 years ago. When one dude looks like Carl Lewis, Well, Shannon did that like once, and only once. I don't know if Michigan State did a good job getting back on it on other times. And Izzo said earlier this week that they will transition faster than, it's like Michigan State did in 2000. And I guess I haven't seen enough of them to see it, but I saw it in that instant. And he'd scored 6 straight points on Walker. They take Walker off Shannon, put Akins on him, and Akins did a decent job of keeping him somewhat quiet late in the first half. But it was just crisis after crisis matchup-wise for Michigan State against these Illinois individuals.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time. Well, let's talk about some of the matchups at least, but I can't. The last time I felt like Michigan State really got a win over a team that was like better than they were and had more depth, it had everything that they needed that Michigan State didn't have, was it the last year that Michigan State won the Big Ten championship? It was Purdue here. Purdue had a lot of advantages. Swanigan Purdue with a whole bunch of guys. Was it Carson Edwards? Was that who? Or I don't know, like the little Edwards dude.
Carson Edwards?
Yeah, that little dude that the Pistons drafted, but he was just coming on that year. He was a Player of the Year candidate, I believe, or whatever. Yeah. But Purdue had better talent. More depth. They had an advantage at every single position on the floor, and Michigan State found a way to grind out a victory. And I felt the same way in this. And there's going to be times that you play teams that are better than you are, and you have to find ways to win. Now, Michigan State did it with, I think Hoggard playing the best defense that he's played this year. Like
against Domask, pretty much. What did you see there? You were talking about that after the game.
I've just never seen him. Since going back to last year against Rutgers, there were times last year when AJ Hoggard played great defense. I'll go back to the Rutgers against Paul Mulcahy, where he was matched up against him, and he really got into Paul Mulcahy and took that personal. He did it a couple other times when he played big point guards.
I'll tell you, there was one time when he was young, when Izzo was still not sure whether Hoggard was right for this program and everything. But when he played defense on Jaden Ivey that one day when they beat Purdue, that might be the same game. And Hoggard is a young guy and wasn't in as good a shape as he is now. Like, played good defense on an NBA first-round draft pick. It's like, wait, that defense, that's useful.
But he didn't have to play as many minutes in that game. That's a guy coming off. That's a guy that's guy's out of shape, coming off the bench, playing a maximum 15 minutes, 20 minutes if you're in serious foul trouble. In this game, he's a guy that they really need him because he's the one guy that can get downhill and do some damage in the lane with the way Illinois plays defense. But he got up on Domask. And Domas is a big physical guy. Like I saw him walking up for warm-ups. I'm like, man, I knew he was cut up. I knew he's like physical, but he looks like a specimen when he's walking out there. Hoggard took that personally. I think that steal he had at midcourt that he turned into a layup, that is what sparked the Big 10-0 run in the first half where allowed Michigan State to take a 3-point lead into halftime. In the second half, his defense on Domask, that took away a little bit of what they do. Illinois is, they've got a lot of different weapons, but he's a key part of what they do. And by him playing great defense on him, it forced other guys to be more than spot-up shooters. And I think this is the best I've seen AJ play defense this year. And the message to him is going to be, can you do this every time out? Because I don't feel like he's played up to his capabilities on defense. I feel like he's a little bit slow on closeouts at times. I feel like sometimes he's going to follow a three-point shooter when he doesn't really need to.
Gets a little casual. Yeah. And Izzo hates that. And Hoggard in the locker room after the game pretty much admitted, he kind of needs to be corrected on those things by Izzo and his own father. So Hoggard took all that, was hard on himself, and as he's done it through his whole career, when you challenge him and hold him to task, he doesn't go suck his thumb and pout in the corner. Right. He comes back and goes to work. And it's easy for me to say, why can't you be like that every game? It's hard to do that for 31 games. That's the challenge. He did it today, and when he does it today, he's excellent, and this team is pretty good when that happens also. And Izzo says, hey, flowers today, compliments guarded optimism, but Izzo says he's guarded with it until and unless these guys can show consistently that they can produce it. And that's what they're going to need to do with games coming up at Penn State, at Michigan. If they can consistently deliver with this type of urgency without a crowd, that'll determine whether or not they can become a 7th seed and make it out of the first weekend in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and then going back to Hoggard, you and I both are parents with sons, right? And so, you're always wondering, when's my son going to grow up and he's going to stop doing this every week? Why do I have to remind him to do this? And I'm sure Izzo feels the same way with AJ Hoggard. There's a lot of guys.
Or when we were little brats, we're big brats now, but we were the same type of stuff.
No, I understand that, but with guys in this program that stay as long as AJ Hoggard has, you expect him to get to that point where he stops being that kid and grows up. And we've seen that over the course of the years. Like some guys don't last that long, and don't grow up. But I expected Hoggard to be a better version of himself before now.
And Izzo did too. And it's kind of like, that's why I've mentioned a few times in the last few weeks, this team is like herding cats.
Right.
You can't get cats to listen. It's just one of the hard situations. Now, Izzo's had that in the past.
I'm not a cat person.
I know with Izzo had that with like Brandon Dawson all through 4 years. Nick Ward, trying to, Sutan. Izzo battled with a lot of those guys to keep them focused and dialed in and 100% urgent.
Not used to that with guards, man. I know the Sutan thing and Nick Ward. I mean, that wasn't going to change.
It's a good point. Point guard's different. You're right.
Right, Brandon Dawson. Impact defender. You had to live with some of the stuff that you didn't like, and so you're going to get that. But I'm talking about a point guard, right?
And quite frankly, if you had Jeremy Fears, I was talking with a former Michigan State basketball player last night. Saw him out somewhere, and he thinks that with Fears not being there, just kind of keeps the screws loose with Hoggard. Because that Minnesota game, Hoggard. And what I wrote after the game, I'm like, man, he saw that Walker was hurt, and at that point, no one knew how long Walker was going to be out. And I never asked Hoggard about that, but it looked to me like he was like, okay, I got to do more and take over because we don't know, this game's in the balance. And he believed in himself. I don't have a problem with that at all. Izzo had a problem with some of the decisions, but with Hoggard doing that and Izzo not liking those decisions, if he had Fears, we would have seen Izzo put Fears in, and Hoggard probably wouldn't have went. Right. And this is where Izzo has done it in the past. If Izzo has enough wins to work with, maybe he wouldn't have done it there because Michigan State has their back against the wall. They have to get X number of wins to get an NCAA tournament. But we've seen it over the last 25 years that if they have enough wins, and maybe they're not really right in the Big Ten title chase, but maybe a couple games back, he will sit Darrell Summers for 18 minutes or Brandon Dawson for 14 minutes and risk losing and accept a loss if it can make one guy, if it can drive home a point, that can make that player better in March. And Izzo, knowing Izzo like we do, would have liked to have done that with Hoggard if he had Fears and the wins to work with. Instead, he had to ride it out, and they lost the game anyway, and then they went back to work at the film this week, trying to get everything straightened out.
I buy that if Fears can shoot the ball. He
wanted a guy to make decisions, and we don't know how good Fears would be at this point if what happened to him hadn't happened. So Izzo doesn't have all the cards to play that he normally would at this time of year to do some of the things he would do in the past to someone who is a little bit wayward like that, even a senior. But they're herding cats out here. Herding. Is there a type of dog that you don't like? Are there any type of dogs that are difficult to herd?
I'm not a big fan of Pomeranians, but
Pomeranians are herding Pomeranians out here.
Things,
hairless dogs.
Or the one. I'm a big fan of most dogs, but I've never tried to herd cats, nor will I.
It's impossible. What else we have here, Paul? Now, Carson Cooper playing 22 minutes. Jackson Kohler looking more and more lively. He was active on the glass a little bit. Didn't finish some of his post moves against a lot of size in there, but you can just see a little more snap to him. He had a couple had a big putback at one point. The one where he reverse layup, got fouled, and it rolled off the rim. Izzo yelled at him for not making that shot. Then he goes to the foul line for the first free throws of the season.
That's why Izzo yelled at him.
Because he misses both first free throws of the season for him to remind us of how much they've missed Kohler through the season. Kohler played more minutes than Sissoko today.
Yeah.
And if Kohler can stay on the court and start carving out some of that offense and just give them just a different flavor, that can help a lot too, and that's something we've not seen from this team yet. Now he has to show he can play defense in order to stay on the court and deliver on offense. He was on the court and they put Dane Danger in, and they tried to go down low with Danger against him. And Kohler, I thought, stood his ground pretty good on defense a few times. Meanwhile, Sissoko only plays 8 minutes. Cooper, people wondering why Cooper's in there so much. Cooper is doing a lot of good things on defense. Now he got beat on consecutive plays with about 10 minutes to go when they built their little 8-point lead. But when Michigan State's doing switches and in a crunch situation, he finds himself guarding Ty Rodgers, it's not something you want to do for 40 minutes, but he can survive a couple possessions doing that. Or he has to get out on Coleman Hawkins or guard danger in the post. He's versatile. It's not like he's Andre Hudson, but he's versatile, and he's functionally versatile on defense, and that is important to keep the boat afloat, and that's why he's in the game. Now, he doesn't finish, of course, on offense, has trouble at the foul line, but the things he gives you on defense are things that there's no one else on campus that can do to that extent.
Can I drop an F-bomb on the VCast?
No.
I'm not going to.
No.
But I don't know who you want in there. Jackson Kohler can match up against Dane Danger because Dane Danger is fat and slow. Bottom line. And Kohler did some good things.
He didn't get bullied down low, though.
No, and he's strong. And Kohler has gotten strong.
Last year, Kohler would have caved in there.
Absolutely. But he's strong enough and he's quick enough to match up with Dane Danger. And that's the card that Michigan State had in this game that they didn't have last year. But in terms of, I don't know who you're going to put in at center, and it's about risk management. It's about not giving up threes. And Cooper did a really nice job of that. I thought early on, Sissoko, he helped set the tone for physicality. The early foul trouble and the one on the quote trip or whatever, that was ridiculous. But this reminds me of 4 years ago or whatever when Michigan State had a point guard problem and there was no available point guard. And everyone was like, as soon as one guy did well, why aren't you playing this guy? As soon as that guy did bad, well, why don't you play this guy? They don't have what they traditionally need, so they're going to have to make do with what they can. They've got two guys in Sissoko and Carson Cooper who are serviceable on defense and can rebound. Cooper's doing a better job of rebounding. Kudos to him. He's doing a better job rim protecting. Kudos to him. He's doing a better job ball screen defense. He's getting better every single game out there as a defender. Sissoko still is what he is. He's still their best rebounder on the team. And Kohler, he had a matchup today that he could do some damage in.
And Illinois' style of offense didn't really stress a center lateral movement-wise. So Kohler, that part didn't really get stressed.
But when they want to play bully ball by putting Dane Danger in there, that's a nice counter that Michigan State has against this Illinois team that maybe they don't have against like a Maryland, with their big guy. So Kohler, you can use him against Michigan, and that type of thing. And he's doing some good things and rebounding well. He's improved as a rebounder. So those are all really good things. But in terms of the revolving door of people complaining about centers, it is what it is. So you have to use those guys piecemeal to get what you can. And today, Sissoko was a non-factor, and Michigan State picked up for him in a lot of different ways. I thought Carson Cooper played tremendous basketball. He was the best version of him that he could be against a tough team. And there's matchup problems every single place on the floor against this Illinois team. Kudos to him for not getting exploited more. The fact that he can try to match up with Coleman Hawkins, the fact that he can try to check a Ty Rodgers who has guard-level athleticism. Not many guys can do that. So I think Cooper played a good game for Michigan State, and I think guards overall did a great job picking up the slack on the rebounding front. Jaden Akins getting 6 boards or whatever he had, but Michigan State matching Illinois on the boards, despite being undersized at every single position on the floor, was a pretty darn impressive thing today.
I know Illinois, their smallest starter is 6'6", and then they bring Harmon off the bench. He's their shortest regular. He's 6'4", and they hunt those matchups and they do a lot of damage. And Michigan State defensively, Trey Holloman had some problems here and there. He lost guys for open three-pointers a couple times. They were disappointed with that. People are wondering why Illinois had all those openings from three-point range. It's because Michigan State had to double team to make up for some of those matchup disadvantages. So whether you're double teaming or helping off a drive, Illinois does a really good job getting you to overcommit and then finding the extra man with the extra pass, finding the open man with the extra pass. That's why they had those open threes. And they had a nice percentage of them, 36%, but not a devastating percentage of it. And that's how Michigan State stayed afloat and got it done in the end. A game that they had to have, and really an emotional victory for Michigan State. And I think one that potentially could draw a close team even closer.
Right. It's tough because they drive so much. So you're drawing guys. You got a post mismatch, like you said, it draws an extra defender, but then you've got drivers. So they've got shooters everywhere on the floor. So that's one thing that makes this different than a Maryland team, where you have to count for 2 shooters, perhaps. Every single person on this Illinois team can shoot the ball for the most part.
Except for Rodgers.
Except for Rodgers and Dane Danger or whatever, but even he's hit a couple.
Doesn't play much.
But you've got guys spaced out, and that's what the Brad Underwood offense does. You got drivers and you got guys spaced, and those guys not only do they drive, but they either post or they kick out. It's a system that really does a really good job with spacing, and they've got guys that can really fill it up today. And that's why it's open. If you have to help, someone's going to be open.
And Damask really wasn't left open to do that damage because of Hoggard. Hoggard did a lot to do that to keep Domask in check. Now, Cohen Carr gets in there and does a few things. He's active. He lost somebody on defense once, but Izzo was complimentary of him. Cohen Carr's the guy that's got to continue to come around to give them some horsepower, because Michigan State needs some horsepower from a guy his height, and he gave them a little bit of lift there when Holloman was out. Now Holloman
had foul trouble too.
Yeah, 2 fouls in the first half, and defenders got lost.
Go for it.
You're fine. Oh, you want me to move that? No, that's not mine. You go ahead. Go ahead and take that. Yeah.
Move the sweatshirt
if you want. Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say.
Holloman was in foul trouble today. The one thing that Cohen Carr, he's got to watch out for is there's a shot clock going down type of situation, and he was out on the perimeter and Terrence Shannon, and he hit a shot, and Shannon hit a respite kind of three with. I don't know if the
shot clock was down.
I don't know if the shot clock was down or not, to be honest with you. But Cohen Carr, the one thing that people do against him is he's better. You don't want to have Cohen Carr anywhere near where you are if you're trying to get the ball off around the rim. But he has a harder time playing on ball, and Shannon exploited him for a three. But it was a deep three. It was kind of what you would consider a bad shot, and I'm not sure if Cohen Carr could have done a better job contesting. It was way deep, and it went through, and I think it tied the game 44-44 or something like that.
A few times when Michigan State forced them to go inside out and rotate and find the open man, they got 3-point looks off of that. But there are a few times when they threw it out of bounds in those situations where Michigan State's scramble defensive rotations caused some turnovers or caused some indecision or upset the rhythm a little bit. One time they threw it to nobody, but I think Shannon chased it down and hit a three-pointer from the logo when the shot clock was down, and Izzo just kind of looked up to the heavens like it wasn't going to be their day. But Michigan State's defense rose up in some of those occasions also, electing to try to take away their best looks and try to scramble back out to it. It wasn't a perfect way to operate, but you're dealing with a losing hand trying to cover all those guys. Now Michigan State, before we go, Malik Hall continues to do well. With versatility on offense, hit the 1 3-pointer, decent with the drive, pretty good with the drive for his size, for a guy his size. A little bit of a matchup problem, a little bit of a matchup 4. Might not be a stretch 4 traditionally, but he's more like a 1998 mismatch 4. A guy that can kind of do some things off the dribble and get some medium range things going on, going against you. So now teams, and he can post up, which they don't have a lot of post offense, but Michigan State looks to get that post established. Here's the point. You're starting to see Malik Hall get double-teamed, Minnesota double-teamed, making someone else beat them. It's the first time in Malik Hall's career that he's a guy that high on the scouting report. Let's make someone besides him or Walker beat us. So he's getting double-teamed in the post, which took away some of his offense in the Minnesota game. People wonder where he went. Well, they kind of took that away. And today, Illinois was topside fronting him in the post. It's the first time we've ever seen a team that I can remember not letting Hall get it in the post. Right. So he's getting some special order defense there a little bit. Still was very efficient and effective today, but there'll be times when we'll see if Walker can get healthy and so forth, but where other guys are going to have to find other ways to get points, which can get really different as the opponents get tough, when you start playing for in March and so forth.
Minnesota's this is the other thing that bugs me about the Minnesota game is Pharrell Payne was coming off a game, their center. He's a shot blocker. He didn't do much against Michigan State here, but he was coming off a game where he had 14 points and 10 rebounds, and he had a back injury when he played Michigan State the first time. So I think why didn't Malik Hall score in the post? You've got Dawson, who's 6'10", 6'11" maybe. He's got a big wingspan. You got Pharrell Payne, who's a shot blocker, who's a really good athlete. But it goes back to what happens when you lose to a team that wasn't good last year. It's they're terrible, but they're not. It's a different type of personnel, and the rim protection that Minnesota has right now is far superior to what it was last year. And people have to realize that Malik Hall's not going to be able to get great post looks against 6'11", 6'10" guys that can jump out. And
they're double teaming.
Yeah,
Minnesota was.
That can jump out of the gym. But what he can do, if you match up baseline against Coleman Hawkins, is he can put a shoulder into him and hit that shot. And I think his best, where he's most effective, is when they can get it to him on the block and the baseline and let him go to work instead of trying to dribble into the teeth of traffic. And he does a good job. The other thing he does a really good job of is beating that zone defense. We saw it automatic. Like, he sees the zone defense, he drops to the elbow, he gets the ball, and he makes it happen. So that's another thing that Malik Hall really gives you. He's a zone killer.
Made a 14-footer. They played zone for one possession, or Michigan State went to Malik Hall. It's time to start appreciating Malik Hall for everything he is and stop talking about the things that he's not. He's an excellent college basketball player that can get even better. Yeah. And we saw him turn down a three today. And then later in that possession, AJ Hoggard had to attempt a difficult shot at the shot clock. So you turn down an open three. I thought it was an open three to get something more difficult later. Malik Hall, they're trying to give him more and more confidence. Makes the three-pointer today, so his three-point percentage is up over 33% now. That's productive. And he was ice cold in November, December. I didn't think he'd quite get here to this point. Now he's very particular about which three-pointers he takes.
It's weird because for a while he wasn't taking ones that were straight on. He was driving in the teeth of the traffic. Now he's taking them from the wing. At that time he was able to take some from the corner. Now he's driving from the corner. So it's kind of.
Can you do pick and pop with him, like old-fashioned Kenny Goins, ball screen back to you, pick and pop, stretch of defense? It's a quick-hitting shot clock play that Michigan State and everybody in the country runs, but he's not necessarily, like we say, a consummate stretch four. You and I would like to see him shoot a little bit more, and at some point you got to shoot the dice because it's hard to get openings elsewhere in given possessions depending on who's on the court and who the opponent has. Having that quick pick and pop. Jason Williams, Shane Battier, shot. Malik Hall, we don't see them run that, but maybe that's something that comes even later in the year. Don't close the door on that. That could be coming. And, when someone like Goran Suton became MVP of the Midwest Regional, he had a real good career at Michigan State, and he was fearless. But a point came when, and AJ Granger too, where they just had a quicker mindset trigger, and it was late in their careers, like their senior year.
I will say this: Granger and Suton both had quicker releases than Hall. And so I wonder about the pick and pop thing. If you have a slower release type, if that's a problem.
Sure.
The other thing that you don't see as much with him that you saw with Joey Hauser and some other guys against really tough opponents is the trailer three.
Yeah.
That's something we haven't seen all season long. And that's, Michigan State has had so much production out of that trailer three against really, really good defensive teams. You think of some of the Kentuckys they play against or whatever in the NCAA tournament or, even a Memphis. I think of Adrian Payne hitting some of those trailer threes. Joey Hauser last year. That's, so Michigan State getting good transition production right now without some of their arrows in the quiver. Yeah. And so maybe we ought to give their transition offense a little bit more credit than we have. It's tough because it's inconsistent, the lack of rebounding, and then a lot of the transition scoring is predicated on forcing turnovers. You don't get as much when you don't force a lot of turnovers. So if teams take care of the ball, it's tougher to get those transition scoring opportunities. I thought Michigan State today did a great job in transition against a team that didn't really turn the ball over a lot. Illinois had some turnovers at inopportune times, as we talked about earlier in the VCast, but overall, Illinois took relatively good care of the ball.
They did. And Michigan State, without some of their traditional staples, but there's a chance that some of those staples still yet could come around. So what do you think, Michigan State, NCAA tournament team?
You asked me this a bunch of times. Hell yeah, they're an NCAA tournament team. And if they had lost today, they would still be in position to be an NCAA tournament team. The metrics like them. They played a tough strength of schedule. I think that's one of the other things that we tend to disregard sometimes. We don't look at necessarily who they played. And who they played, they might have lost to, but a lot of those games were really close. A lot of those games were like, okay, you shoot free throws here.
They don't have any bad losses.
Right.
And in that schedule, the win over Indiana State looks good. They're 20-3. The win over Butler looks good. Yeah. The loss of James Madison, it got away from them, free throws and all that. And Izzo made the point today that if they make free throws and win that game, they make free throws and win and beat Minnesota, then right now they'd be 17-7 and ranked in the top 20. That's what Kentucky right now is 17-7, the number 17 in the country. That's what Michigan State would be with just those two wins. But they're out of the top 25. They're on the bubble coming into this game a little bit for now. You go from on the bubble to top 25 and dangerous kind of real quickly in today's landscape.
Yeah, the other thing too is there's other teams in the conference that are sliding, right? So all of a sudden, you look at if teams go, teams are capable, depending on who they play, of going on a 4 or 5 game losing streak. Michigan State has been pretty consistent compared to a lot of Big Ten teams not named Purdue in recent weeks since the resumption of Big Ten play. I think, they're a tournament team, but they can't be lackadaisical. No. They have to play with the type of effort that they played with today, and everyone has to be on the same page. So I think there's some learning moments here. I think it was a big deal to have them play their best game in front of alumni. They played Spartan basketball today, and I think it's something that you can carry over. I think for an AJ Hoggard, I think it's something he can feed off of and grow from. And
Illinois has been an excellent rebounding team. And Michigan State does not have a good rebounding team. We know that. He always puts emphasis on rebounding, but this week, especially hard emphasis on rebounding. Dealing with Ty Rodgers and the way some of those guys really crashed the rim, and rebounding ended up being 30-30, dead even today, 33. And that's a victory for Michigan State and Michigan State visibly was more intent on putting a body into people. And I was at practice on Thursday, and a big thing Izzo was talking about is, when the shot goes up, I don't want anybody on defense for our team, for Michigan State, watching the flight of the ball. Shot goes up, find your man, put a body on them. And Illinois gets 9 offensive rebounds on 34 misses. That's less than 33%. Right. That's quality defensive rebounding against a team that can murder you on the offensive glass. Michigan State made sure that was not a determining factor in this game. So solid job in Michigan State matching up against a real good rebounding team.
We saw better box outs in the first 5 minutes. One thing that was different from this game than the other ones, we saw guys like Monty Sissoko erasing guys and pushing them out. We saw Malik Hall, who's not great at cutting out. We saw him get a butt into someone and push them a long distance.
Yes.
And so those are things like if you can cut out and you can
it was different.
Move guys.
Michigan State was different.
When they cut out, they move guys.
And it worked.
Right. And that's something, if it works, and you can grow from, and it creates scoring opportunities. So, I think I feel better about this, seeing that they can do it, as opposed to thinking they don't have the personnel. I've been talking to you for weeks about, hey, one of the shortcomings in the Michigan State program is they forgot to recruit rebounders. The thought that maybe that you can
They tried to recruit Ty Rodgers.
Right, exactly. And that's a guy that could really help out. But the idea that, hey, if
Luke Goody, too, they tried to recruit him.
If you're athletic enough, and you can jump and you're a good kid, we can teach you a rebound. That's not necessarily the case. Some people grow into it. Joey Hauser grew into it, but Michigan State has been very not good rebounding-wise, given the amount of emphasis they place on rebounding in the program. They took a step today. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. Nice win for Michigan State, and they can build on it as long as they don't take any backward steps from the standard that they set today. That looks like Michigan State, a type of Michigan State that not a lot of teams will be raising their hands to play in March, in my opinion. That doesn't mean they're great yet, but you can see that Michigan State has some capabilities, and that was today with Tyson Walker, not the full-blown Tyson Walker. Malik Hall coming around doing some good things. Aikens playing a nice role, and Hoggard being the forceful defender and heady point guard and making a big shot. And this is one thing before we go. When Hoggard took that shot, we asked Hoggard about it in the locker room. What were you thinking? He said, "I'm taking that shot." He was thinking, "I'm shooting it. That's what he said. That's what he said. I might ask Izzo about it a little bit next week after a practice or something, but I don't know the difference between a good shot and a bad shot, because that shot was one that he might have gotten reprimanded for, and it was maybe the key shot in this game. And Illinois was kind of like, they weren't like sagging way off on him, but they weren't really like racing out on him to contest it. So I don't really know, and I'm not in the film sessions. I don't know what's good and what's not good, but some of the shots he took against Minnesota, they didn't want him to, apparently, but I was like, man, I don't think that's a bad shot. Maybe a couple of them were overzealous, but I don't know the difference between a good shot and a bad shot for what they're looking for with him, and I wonder if Hoggard knows the difference. Yeah. That was a good shot, and it was the biggest shot of the game.
I think sometimes it's the angle the ball comes out, and he took his time and he set and he was set. And
there's a ready shoot, Judd Heathcote, ready shoot shot.
The other thing is he had success against Illinois in the first game. He made some tough shots, and Brad Underwood talked about their big three, and he talked about those guys shooting the ball well from the perimeter. So he considered AJ Hoggard a perimeter scoring threat. At least he was on the scouting report. If Brad Underwood is to be trusted, based on his pre-game interview. And I see no reason why he shouldn't. Based on how Hoggard was playing in that game, it's not like he's hunting threes. He's doing a lot of good stuff downhill. They did a nice job rim protecting against him for a while because he was 2 for 6 for a while, I believe, and he thought he was getting fouled going to the basket. He did a nice job getting to the free throw line, but that lane was pretty clogged, and I think that was a good shot.
I agree.
Well, he made it, so it was a good shot.
Right. I thought some of those in Minnesota were good too. And you mentioned rim protection against the Gophers. What's the guy's name? Farrell what?
Farrell Payne.
Farrell Payne was a pain to Hoggard when Hoggard drove in and missed some of those shots, some of those glassers that he made last year. Payne was in there doing that rim protection like you're talking about, which is easier to do when you don't have a Joey Hauser stretching the court out there.
Absolutely.
So Michigan State's pretty good. They're not a complete team, offensively or defensively, but they showed some heart today and some veteran composure, and it's an old cliche, but they wanted it more, and the crowd had everything to do with it. Izzo's first words at the press conference were, thank God for the home court advantage, because that had everything to do with Michigan State getting a massive, much-needed win. And Michigan State's a good enough team that it's a little bit of a shame that they needed to win this game, just how the schedule went. In the Big Ten, you have to play 20 conference games, and that screws up your December and all those things in terms of having to play December, an important game December 2nd. You lose, you're in the hole and all that stuff.
But you already played Wisconsin twice, a team you don't match up well with.
And with those games in December, you don't get a chance to develop Cohen, Carr, and Booker like you would if you had a 16-game Big Ten schedule like you had 20 years ago. So you just kind of get painted into a corner. Then you can't play them because you have to win, and then the games are close, and it snowballs. And they came in desperate today, had to win because of all those circumstances. It's nobody's fault, but Big Ten makes it harder on some of their own teams in some ways, and it's been hard on Michigan State. But they showed character once again, like they've done for the last 700 games. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. You've been watching the VCast from Breslin Center with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.